Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Thursday, May 28th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter. In today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, we'll give you an update, the latest on the disaster in Longview at the Nippon Pulp and Paper Mill. The death toll is climbing, and there are still a lot more questions than answers. I have a discussion with Representative Jim Walsh about that. Then parents and community members, many of them calling on the resignation of the entire school board in Longview, coincidentally as well. This in connection with the high school boys basketball team sexual assault investigation. And we told you of the recent arrest of the district superintendent there. We have now 5 employees placed on paid administrative leave. Meantime, the school board, again, under pressure from the community because it was just last month the school board unanimously approved an extension of the superintendent's contract, even though they were supposedly well aware of the fact that there might have been some cover up or at least, an obstruction of the case from the perspective of the local police department. And then tragedy in Aberdeen. We have another child death, a little boy who was found buried in the backyard of a family member's home in Aberdeen earlier this month. This again is a child under the supervision of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. We had foster parents that had this little boy for about 2 years and begged the state not to send him back to his biological parents. The state instead sent him back, and now we have a dead little boy. So we're going to bring you the latest on that case. As hard as it is to hear, it's something that we have to pay attention to, or this is never going to get fixed. So let's dive into today's episode. It has been 2 days now since the disastrous industrial incident at the Nippon DynaWave plant in Longview. The death toll now has risen to 11. Only 2 of those bodies have been recovered. 9 more are presumed dead. And in some cases, we have drone video images that confirm victims that are deceased. They have not been able to get to them, though, because that massive tank containing white liquor used to make paper pulp is still very unstable. You've probably seen the images. It's kind of like a crushed giant aluminum can. At the base of it, you see it sort of compressed and then tilted over to the side. And you still have, I heard today, the latest estimate is about 25,000 gallons of that liquid still remaining in there. They've been unable to empty it because, again, it's so unstable. And they really want to recover those remaining victims. I spoke last night with GOP Chairman Jim Walsh, who has visited the site, and I asked him, what happened? What do you think happened, Representative Walsh? This is bizarre. We've heard the terms, explosion, implosion. Did it somehow just tip over, or was something else involved? So I asked him about that, and here's what he told me.
There are different rumors and there's always gossip mills going, and some of them are saying that it was a vehicle collision like a forklift or like a truck or something that might have hit it. There's no evidence at the moment of that. There are people who are concerned too about this incident and several down in California and a couple in Oregon, and they're wondering whether it could have been foul play of some sort of terroristic thing or sabotage thing. I almost hate to even bring these things up because it gives it oxygen, but there's no evidence of that. And we need to proceed very carefully with the speculation on how this happened. Let the process work its way out. Let the fire department investigators and the EPA investigators clean it up, get through it, do the recovery, and they will piece together as best they can what happened that caused the collapse or the implosion.
Now, Nippon DynaWave officials are saying that white liquor that did spill out, tens of thousands of gallons of it, did get into local storm drains and has contaminated some local dikes and the Columbia River. Um, they've in fact pulled out some dead fish that they believe is a result of the contamination. There's no evidence, they say, and ecology's there on site. There's no evidence that it has gotten into the local drinking water supply, but they're closely monitoring that situation. It is a small community, and Representative Walsh echoed what Senator Jeff Wilson had told me earlier this week, in that, everybody knows somebody who works at that facility. And with 11 lives lost, 9 more people injured in this disaster, the impact on this community is going to be long lasting. So, as soon as we learn more, we'll share it. I'm sure we'll have an update in tomorrow's episode. You can also check out our Center Square Washington page for updates. Also in Longview, coincidentally, we have parents and community members calling for the resignation of the Longview School Board, not just the president, the vice president, but the entire school board. They want them to step down amid the high school sex assault investigation involving the boys' basketball team at Mark Morris High School. Now, you may recall Superintendent Karen Cloninger was arrested last week. She's facing very serious accusations and charges of potentially covering up the abuse allegations involving those students, telling other staff members not to talk about this. We're going to kind of deal with this internally, as you likely know, because of mandatory reporting laws for school officials. You're not allowed to do that. You hear any inkling of something like this, you must immediately report that to law enforcement. But the assertion here is that police found out from one of the parents of the alleged victims, and then they went to the district, and then the district said, oh, yeah, we knew about this about a week ago. That's the problem for district officials. So we now have 5 of them placed on paid administrative leave. The reports are pretty disturbing. I don't need to detail all of them. You can certainly Google it if you want to know more. But it again involves older boys on the boys' basketball team at Mark Morris High School, allegedly sexually assaulting, raping other players on the team. And this is alleged to have gone on from about Thanksgiving of last year up through the end of January this year. So this was not a one-off situation. This happened on multiple occasions. So before Tuesday's school board meeting, which was the first board meeting since the arrest of the superintendent and the world found out about this story, there was a large group of people that gathered outside the board meeting offices, and some were holding signs, demanding accountability, demanding that the board members resign. So during public comment, many people came up and expressed their anger, their frustration, their outrage. Some in very raised voices said, get up right now, get out of your seat, resign tonight. Why are you here? Why did you extend the superintendent's contract amid this very serious ongoing investigation? So I want to share with you a video of one gentleman who got up to speak during public comment on Tuesday evening.
You have known all along that it was within your authority to place Dr. Cloninger on administrative leave. She had earned that from the beginning when she did not pursue openness, honesty, or transparency, refusing to act even after the initial police reports had said that there was action to be taken. You all failed in your responsibilities to remove her from her position when she first refused to hold anyone accountable. Turns out she was threatening the employment of the staff here. You all own the consequences of those actions because you chose to keep her here while she chose to do those things. In our last meeting, Jennifer Leach made a comment showing disdain for the parents who come here to do our duty to this district and provide input for the process of this board. What's worse is we had a city councilman join in mocking the public before trying to intimidate one of the people here to speak when they stated they had a problem with being mocked. Director Rotala, when will you hold your own to the same standard that you enforced against us to limit our free speech? When will you cut off the other directors like Barb Westbrook's spontaneous outbursts or Jennifer Leach showing her disdain for the public? When will you start equally enforcing the rules? This is starting to feel discriminatory. It's starting to feel like every time somebody comes to say something against you, you cut them off. Strict to the rules, but when they're in your favor, when they're on your side, you allow it. We saw that here tonight. Whenever somebody that came up against the board came to speak, They got 5 to 10 seconds past that 3-minute timer. But when the wonderful educator, I don't remember his name, came up, he went 30 seconds over and you just kind of let him go. That's discriminatory. That's viewpoint discrimination. I'm up here saying these things not because I want the board to get sued, but because I don't want to pay those fines for your incompetence. Stop doing these things. Start respecting the parents and the public. These are our children, not yours.
His testimony is sort of exemplified the whole tone of public comment that took place at that Tuesday meeting. No members of the board yet to resign. We'll keep up with that. I did have a conversation a few days ago with the school board president over the phone, an unrecorded conversation. He didn't want anything on the record, but he said they're taking it very seriously. He doesn't believe they did anything wrong with extending the superintendent's contract because they didn't fully understand maybe the depth of the allegations, the charges that would be brought against her. So anything more on that, we will be sure to bring you those updates. But poor Longview. I mean, here they are, national attention for this school district sexual assault investigation. And now, of course, this week's disaster at the pulp and paper mill in Longview. So a lot of concern for that community right now. Now, unfortunately, today's episode does not include really any good news because we have more on that horrible case out of Aberdeen and little Aiden Bivens, that 4-year-old boy who was found buried in the backyard of a family member's home earlier this month. Now, it was extended family members of Aiden's who grew increasingly concerned because they hadn't seen him. I don't know what the communication was like with the biological parents at that point, if they were lying about where he was, or maybe just saying, he's fine, he's taking a nap, whatever. I have no idea. But the extended family members were concerned enough that they phoned police and said, please do a welfare check and find out where Aiden is. And it was thereafter that police then discovered this shallow grave in the backyard. Now, this case bears some eerily similar, disturbing parallels to the case of Oakley Carlson. If you've been in Washington State for any length of time, you remember that case of that little 5-year-old girl was in the news for years. And it was a similar case to Aiden's, not just geographically where this took place. She was in Oakville, Washington, and this case with Aiden, he's in Aberdeen. So same, community, really, Grace Harbor County. They had a foster family in Oakley Carlson's case that desperately wanted her, loved her, said, don't send her back to her biological family. I'm very concerned about her welfare if you do. Well, that's apparently the same situation here with Aiden. He had a foster family that had him from the time he was about 1 to 3. And they begged the Department of Children, Youth, and Families and social workers on his case not to send him back to his parents. They were very concerned that if that happened, something like this could happen to him. So I spoke to Representative Walsh. He is from Aberdeen, so this is right in his, community, and he's very concerned that this is yet another case where we have a child under the supervision of the state who ends up losing their life.
He had been between a foster family and biological parents who were troubled, who've had problems, and he was with the foster family for a while, for a couple of years, just a little boy, he's not very old, was returned to his biological parents. Some of the extended family were concerned that they hadn't seen the boy in a little while. And then about a week ago, someone notified the authorities, and the little boy was found buried in a shallow grave in a backyard of a house. The Aberdeen Police Department is still in active investigation on it. It's easy to presume this or that, but we should try not to do that. Let the police finish their investigation and come up with their narrative of what happened, their facts of what happened. But what is striking to people in the harbor. It's not just on the harbor. It's all around the state. What's striking to people who care about these issues is how closely it parallels the Oakley Carlson case, also from a Grays Harbor area, where the little girl disappeared. And in her case, the body was never found. She has now been declared dead legally, but the body has never been found. And the facts set in the Aiden Bevins case and the Oakley Carlson case are very similar. The child had moved between troubled biological parents and foster parents. In these stories, the foster parents are kind of the heroes. They treated the children well and voiced concern. In each case, it was the foster parents who voiced concern to Child Protective Services, CPS, and the state agency that oversees CPS is the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF. In both cases, the foster parents appealed to the state agencies and said, we think that this child is in trouble. Please look into it. Keep close tabs on the child. And in both cases, the foster parents were not listened to, and their fears were realized.
It is important to know the autopsy results are not yet back from the coroner on Aiden's death. The cause of his death, exactly what happened, we don't know. And his parents have not been charged. They've certainly been questioned, but the police investigation is ongoing. But it brings up the bigger issue here with the Keeping Families Together Act, which I've written about extensively over the last couple of years, and we've talked about extensively here on episodes of Washington in Focus. This is the act that was intended to reduce the number of foster care placements. And there was some racial issues here. They said it was primarily children in minority homes that were being removed from their biological parents and put into the foster care system. So the Keeping Families Together Act made it so that the sort of threshold for imminent harm was amended to the point that even the evidence of hard drugs in the home and drug addicted parents is oftentimes not a high enough bar to remove a child from the home. Well, that has led to a record number of child deaths and critical incidents in the state of Washington. And during the 2026 legislative session, we had Republicans who tried yet again to get bills, at least consider to get hearings on bills to change that imminent harm threshold to make it easier so that if you've got caseworkers saying, I'm not comfortable returning that child to the biological parent or parents because I've seen evidence of abuse and neglect, often linked to drug abuse in that home. Those bills didn't go anywhere during the session. And so that it was on the House floor where we had several Republicans that offered amendments to the operating budget, kind of a last ditch effort to say, can we do something here, please, to amend this? And there was very passionate, very tearful testimony from House Republicans that went on for hours on a weekend. And then I wrote about it the following Monday. It was difficult to watch the testimony, including this testimony from Representative Travis Couture, Republican from Allen, who has passionately been pushing this issue, trying to get DCYF to amend this imminent harm standard. So this is what he said on the House floor as they attempted to get those amendments to the operating budget.
These kids, Madam Speaker, don't have any more time left to give. As we speak right now, there is one or more precious children in our state living in a flop house, in a tent. Hard drug abuse, sexual violence, malnutrition. I passed my first bill on this House floor about Carry-On Franks, who was seen multiple times by CPS and Department of Children, Youth, and Families, even though he was extremely malnutritioned and beaten by his parents until he died. And Madam Speaker, I don't have to ask permission to read. I've been living in these fatality reports until I want to throw up every night.
Ultimately, Democrats and leadership rejected the efforts, opting to keep the imminent physical harm standard as is intact. Many said they disagreed with the assertion that current law provides or prevents, I should say, caseworkers from getting these kids, removed from homes where there's obvious danger to them. This is going to be an issue. It's going to be coming up again in this upcoming legislative session. And I should also note that the numbers we get from DCYF on critical incidents, whether it's deaths or near deaths of children, are vastly different than what we get from the Office of the Children and Family Ombuds. And that's because DCYF only releases numbers of these incidents for kids that are in their caseloads, right? We've had contact with this family. There's issues with the family. So this is a kid that we're keeping tabs on. But there are many more children who have been dying of fentanyl exposure or abuse and neglect linked to parents' drug addictions that are not tied to the state directly. But the Office of Children and Family Ombuds releases those. And just in the first 6 months of 2026, we had 90, I'm sorry, the first 6 months of 2025. Let me correct that. We don't have numbers yet for 2026. The first 6 months of 2025, we had 92 incidents, critical incidents with children who were killed or nearly killed. In many cases, those were kids tied up with the state. In other cases, it was just a first time, situation where we had drugs in the home and children were exposed and lost their lives or nearly lost their lives. So something that, again, is not going to be fixed unless we amend this Keeping Families Together Act, and DCYF is willing to allow those changes to give their caseworkers who are begging for this change the opportunity to protect these kids. So that is it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Check out the Center Square Washington page for these stories and more from my colleagues. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you get out to enjoy this beautiful sunshine today. We'll see you on Friday.